Yes, I'm fine. Just a moment. I just checking.
I can see you. I can hear you.
Okay, okay. Thank you. I also can.
Yeah, I seem to be, the camera seems to not be aimed at me like it is typically. I'm not sure why I'm on the edge of the screen. I'm
Okay.
trying to move my, there we go. Oh, weird. I have to like turn it near, it's at 45 degrees for me to be face on in this screen. That's a bit, anyway. Okay, hello.
Okay. Hello. Hello. Just 1 minute. Just 1 minute. হ্যালো
Hi.
দোস্ত, তুই কি হচ্ছে একটু আমাদের একটা লাইভে গেছে?
Okay.
হ্যাঁ, ওকে ওকে, থ্যাংক ইউ। হ্যালো
Yes.
হ্যালো, yes, can we start the sessions?
Yes, I can still
Yes.
hear you.
Okay, okay, okay. Thank you. This is Mr. Kevin. I think we long time we do discuss on Facebook regarding many of the development in USA. First, can you please introduce yourself, like, and your jobs and like what the present condition in USA?
Sure. Sure. My name's Kevin Jones. I'm known in the space of impact as the founder of the SOCAP,
Yes, yes.
capitalmarkets.net. We're the largest of the impact investing and social enterprise conferences. About 3,000 people from more than 65 countries come every year. And then
Yes.
I've been working in community investing where venture capital does work. One of the earliest of the impact investing venture capitalists. And we invested in fair trade and literacy companies, and we did well. And I started working about 6 or 7 years where venture capital doesn't work. Smaller scale, more neighborhood scale kind of business. And being with immigrants and savings
Mhm.
coming out of an independent way that immigrants support themselves, saving circles where 10 or 20 women would put up $100 a week and in 10 weeks have $1,000. And it only works if everybody is their money in for everybody else. So defaults are really rare. And worked with Mexican immigrants in Asheville, North Carolina, where I worked along with self-help of the credit union and then a group called Seed Commons to help some of these Mexican immigrants buy the land under their trailer parks so they wouldn't be gentrified out and be at risk of internal displacement when people want their land. And that's worked. And then for the last 15 months, I've been working with Somali refugees, Somali Americans in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and the Twin Cities on a faith-compliant housing solution that involves a cooperative of neighbors investing in neighbors. So it's in the whole savings circle, mutual interdependency that immigrants do to help themselves and invest in themselves to support themselves. But it's just at scale that hasn't been done before. Pretty simple model. 100 people put up $2,500, and that equals a house purchase of $250,000, which is what's needed in Minneapolis. And these are compliant Muslims, so they don't want interest-bearing loans. There are a couple, and so then they get paid back the homeowner over 15 years from house. They're making profit on that investment, but it's not it's halal. It's interest halal. We charge a fee, and they get 20% of the profits, and 50% of the profit goes back into the co-op to buy more houses. And so it's
Yes.
a model which was created by Saeed Sheikh Abdi, a Somali American, who is in Nairobi for. It looks like the flights are going to open up from Nairobi to come back to Minneapolis in a couple of weeks. He says for the first week or so in June. And we're
So,
working with an influential imam who's built mosques in 30 cities. Let me just finish this. And he says he could get us the first 200 people in each of those 30 cities where they've built Somali community mosques. So we think it can spread.
I'm very interested. Like you are a American person, why you do focus on immigrant peoples? What's the reason, and what's the purpose of?
Yeah, well, yeah, well, I didn't really focus there intentionally. It's kind of interesting. I started working with marginalized communities 6 or 7 years ago, and I met an entrepreneur in Cincinnati who was leading an accelerator for marginalized, for mostly African American entrepreneurs who were first-time entrepreneurs, non-college. Going from like a kitchen to a storefront with body care products or food. And I got to see that problem. And they didn't get friends and family capital because they had friends and family, but they didn't have friends and family who could give them $5,000 to do a startup. And so with self-help, this $2 billion credit union, we created a friends and family product that kind of for these startups with wraparound services. And I got to see the problem of, communities where they didn't have a rich, it became a virtual rich uncle, people who didn't have a rich uncle. And that's growing, and it's in several cities. It's in Oakland, it's in several places. And then self-help about 3 years ago said, hey, we have a friends and family problem again with these immigrants here in Nashville. And that's where I live, and that's where they're in North Carolina based thing. And with the thing, so I started, I'm intrigued by the folks who, providing capital to folks who don't have it, because I think much more than like some program or some way of helping, actually giving capital to folks who don't have it and letting them figure out what to do is better than coming into a community with a solution. And then in working with immigrants, one of the things I discovered is that they have a plan, they know what to do, and they just need capital. And so I found that really interesting. And then the other part is that I discovered that they, I think if we're going to get out of our problems from climate change to everything else, we need an economy of mutual interdependence. And I think that's never been more clear than in the coronavirus pandemic. Where it's mutual aid societies and we are caring for each other in ways we have not before, and I think we need to the alternative is this individual centered economy of neoliberal capitalism that's people an expendable human resource. So I'm a faith-based person, and I realize that in the Christian example that you need to love your neighbor, and you need to have everyone be seen as your neighbor. And so one of the things I like about if you talk to immigrants, and we talked to lots of other immigrant groups in the Twin Cities, they said, would you invest in your neighbor? They said, of course, we already are. It's always been us, and people had to leave their country was going to rescue us. So it's a social dynamic that I find really interesting. So I think this model of neighbors investing in neighbors can disrupt the mortgage industry, and it can also and I've never really thought anything about interest. I was an average compound interest. Money is making if you have it. And that's unfair. That gives an edge to those with money against those who don't have money. And there's a reason that Moses and the Abrahamic people were told not to do interest. And Christians forgot. Many Muslims remembered, and I realized that's a better way. So and so I believe in this dynamic of neighbors investing in neighbors, and also making a profit. And so. I doing what I think the world needs, which is investing in each other. Whereas if I went down my street and knocked on doors and say, hey, let's pool our mortgage, people would stand their ground. White folks believe in fences and individualism, and I realized we need this this culture of mutual interdependence and mutuality.
Mhm.
And that in their communities.
Yes, Mr. Kevin.
You're,
Hello, Mr.
hmm,
Kevin. Yes, yes. Can you hear me?
yes, I hear you.
Okay.
Yes, I can.
Yes. Basically, like we are from Asia. So Asia, we have different kind of construction projects and many things. Like I'm from Malaysia. I know about Asia Pacific markets. I know about South Asian markets and many countries. They are actually struggling with project financing when they do housing and this kind of projects. The major thing is there is
Mm.
many of the people is struggling with these kind of things. So do you think like how you working with this policy? Number one, is there any relations in between your policy with microfinance, as well as is it implementable in Asia? What do you think?
I don't know enough to answer that question effectively. I believe that for individual housing, this is replicable anywhere, that neighbors are willing to invest in neighbors.
Mhm, mhm,
So, if there is a community that's healthy and has social connections and there's trust and there's patience, this will work. I believe it can work with any immigrant community in the U.S. I've talked to folks in Sweden, and they think it could be a problem, a solution to immigrant housing there. I think it can work if there's already a culture of neighbors investing in neighbors. If things
mhm,
are efficient and well functioning, I think this can work. I'm talking to the deputy in who were
mhm,
doing the top sale. They're rating about 40,000 a month, and they're buying bodegas and expanding bodegas. I know that it works with the immigrant community in the U.S. across both Muslim and non-Muslim. I'm talking to Ecuadorians and those sorts of things. So I think where you find saving circles functioning well, and when they're connected well to remittances, it can work. But I wouldn't
mhm,
hazard a guess on how it works in other cultures.
mhm. Yes, yes. One thing, like example, at present, what is the situation of immigrant there? Because everything locked down in USA. Like, what's the present conditions? You are talking about. I mean, you have a very good connection with the immigrant there.
Yeah, well, I think immigrants have good jobs and are professionals and have done well. Other immigrants are not as educated, and they're on the front lines of delivering food, which is dangerous. They're in the groceries. Many immigrants are also um, nursing home aides, and in our country, there's 1% of the population that's either in a nursing home. Does the phrase nursing home make sense? Do you know what that is? It's housing for old people who can't care for themselves, and there's
Mhm,
rooms full of housing. It's similar to hospitals, but they live there. So 1% of the population is either in a nursing home or works in a nursing home, and yet 11% of the infections are coming from nursing homes, and 1/3 of the deaths are from that 1%. So immigrants who are working in nursing homes are particularly vulnerable. So I find immigrants often are in jobs that are particularly vulnerable, in grocery stores, in food delivery, and if they're on the front lines and they may be educated, but their education is not recognized. There's physicians who are trained in Asia whose uh, skills are not recognized, and they're delivery drivers for food delivery because there's not a mutual recognition of their professional status. So
mhm,
they are African Americans and immigrants are dying at the highest rates of any population in the
mhm,
U.S. during the
mhm.
pandemic.
Mhm. Like example, when you do this kind of immigrant peoples, okay, so I
Yeah,
think as they are not educated enough, or they are not trained enough, or they are not
right,
integrated with your culture properly. So in that situation,
right.
how you help them? Do you have any training to make a collaborations with them? Do you have any
We
plan to
yeah
do this kind of things?
we're gonna replicate our housing solution to the Somali community first. Uh,
Mhm.
as customers, Somalis and East Africans are more observant than many other Muslim communities in terms of not wanting interest-bearing mortgages. So we're reaching first to people who could buy a house but won't, right, because of interest. And yet they are also at risk of being gentrified out of their apartments. They happen to have big families. So we'll reach out to them, and then we'll go down to folks who can't afford a down payment. But the first people we're going to can afford a 20% down payment, which is how we will make the business. It'll kind of underwrite the starting of the business. This is a business that works at scale, but it's a model that can replicate anywhere. I think one of the things that I think puts immigrants at risk is the stories that white folks have in their heads about immigrants. They see them as frightening, and they see them as a threat. And so I think what we have can help with that, because we built the largest. Are you familiar with Habitat for Humanity? They build houses for the poor, but it's done with sweat equity. So you have to get a Habitat house. You have to have 500 hours of sweat equity to become a homeowner, and then you have to pay it off. Volunteers work with you, and so I think we can do community engagement like we did with Habitat to tell a new story about immigrants. And what we did with Habitat, and we did it in Jackson, Mississippi, which is one of the least progressive states in our country. One of the most, racism is more blatant in Mississippi than many places. And we built one of the largest Habitat chapters with a real pretty simple method. We would bring a prospective homeowner into a white civic club, a white Sunday school class, a white synagogue, a white professional partnership, and we said, look, this is not a handout to the needy. This is a bootstrapping project, and white Americans believe that they bootstrap themselves, even though they may start on third base and stole home, but they still believe they got there on their own.
Mhm.
So that worked, and so we got funding for that philanthropically. With this, we could come into a Sunday school class, a civic club, a professional partnership, and say, look, this is a bootstrapping thing. The first money in is from Somalis. They're investing in each other. You can invest alongside them. It's a hybrid cooperative, so they can invest a kind of preferred non-voting stock, so that if they come in with a lot of money, they don't swamp the community's input, and they can get the emotional payoff of giving to a nonprofit. Really, they are going to get a check every month by the
Mhm.
homeowner.
Mhm.
So they
Mhm.
get a new story, and they get to prove that the new story is true with all the ways that you would get realize that a nonprofit is working. With the stories of lives change, but then we'll also get a check. So I've done work before where you get a small check, and you get the stories of lives change, and they really change attitudes. So I think we need to change the attitudes of white Americans who were born here about immigrants, and we can do it them by co-investing along with immigrants who are investing in their neighbors. And then we expand the concept of neighbors. So I'm working with a Catholic group to create curriculum that will be in the white Sunday school classes that will talk about an economy of interdependence, and how these folks that we're investing in are our neighbors, and we will forge connections, you know, through loans that are paid off.
Mhm. Yes, yes, yes.
So it's reciprocal. It's not a philanthropy handed down.
I just want to know, because we have many audience from Asians countries, and we have many people here. They will see your
Yeah,
interviews and many things. Like
yeah,
example, this kind of activities when
right.
you do, you getting the U.S. government support, or there any kind of backups to helping this kind of
No,
immigrant, or yes.
we are not. I mean, this is based on immigrants investing in their neighbors. Um,
Mhm.
there are some foundations that are interested in funding it, and they're trying to figure out if how they can be part of it. But no, government never is the innovator in the U.S. Government can follow, and we expect the governments will be involved with us once we prove the point. But in America, if you rely on if you wait on the government to innovate, you'll be waiting forever. The immigrants are already doing it, and we're just following, and we're sort of expanding in what the immigrants are doing in investing in their neighbors.
Yes, just one thing, like example from Asia, when people go to USA, they say it's American dream, it's a big things. So actually, how
Yeah,
many of the people they can change their lives? Like you are very experienced as you integrated with the immigrant peoples, and what's the present situations?
yeah. Well, right now we're stalled because no one can gather. We were planning to have 600 people come together who would be the first six investors in the first six houses uh, around April 18th, near the end of Eid before Ramadan. But now we can't gather, and we could do it again. But everybody is worried about housing prices, and they want to know. So we could gather 100 people. Saeed and I were talking about this yesterday. We are putting together the first 200 people and have two houses, but we could have six. If they pay 250,000, it could be that post-pandemic, by November, that house will be worth 150,000 versus 250. So we're waiting to launch one when we can gather together collectively, and two, when we know that housing prices won't go down by 100,000. It could be that your house will be 40% less, by in the fall if you bought it, because of the economy is it's cratering here because of the pandemic. So
Mhm.
everybody's saying, we want it out of the high rises, because the high rises are where millions live, and yeah, and it's much more infection is more prevalent in those cramped hallways, all that kind of thing. But they don't want to. Nobody knows what a house is worth right now,
Mhm. Mhm. Yes, yes.
because it could be real estate, significant thing that could be rapid. We're going to be selling. These are contract for deed. It's not a mortgage. It's just a sort of a better legal form for this kind of thing, to lenders who won't put it up there on Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and be part of the Wall Street thing. We will be reselling our contracts to share costs. And so if we have $250,000 from the house, just to get a little geeky, that they may take 25,000 for doing that note. We have 225,000. So we're going to invest in business expansion by Somali Americans that will pay off our cooperative members, because they can't get a loan for business because of interest. One of the main places in are groceries and goat meat. We're going to do a purchasing cooperative, so that collectively they can, they're buying their goat meat from New Zealand and Australia, and the price of goat meat will go down, and we will get a cut, and our co-op members will get a part of that. We're looking for a similar thing around trucking. Somalis really like long haul driving. Part of it is that it's a business. Part of it is that they can take the summer and go back to Kenya or Somalia and make enough money in 7 months. They can have a track and do the trailer. The revenue, that's halal, there's no interest, and we get the revenue. So they can have real businesses as opposed to kind of these side hustle kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And we can do that the money that we raise from the neighbors investing neighbors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think we can be a revolving small business revenue share loan program where the money you put up to housing, you make more money on it by putting the money out for revenue share, Somali business expansion. Restaurants is another whole place they can do a lot that they want to be able to do. And we think it can be a real economic development engine for immigrant communities, all over the U.S. for sure. And again, I have no idea how this applies in the Asian context.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But this is very difficult jobs, according to my understanding. When you make a like a relationship with a something like that, neighbor investing neighbor house. So how you can make a like
Yeah,
this kind of relationship? Like this is human relationship is complex, but and this is also a new concept for the
yeah,
economy.
they are. Yeah, well, one, if there are good, well-functioning saving circles and people in that particular community in a city are investing in each other through savings circles, that's one thing. The other thing is that we're working with moms. Like I said, this one imam, Sheikh Abdurrahman Ahmed, has built mosques in 30 cities around the U.S. He's raised for the network. He's kind of in Seattle, talking the other leading cities, they're mostly Columbus and San Diego and Portland. They've all heard about it. And they solve a problem. It's small, but then working with nonprofits and community leaders who have trust. There has to be, there has to have a culture where neighbors are investing in neighbors, and there's some level of, they're not dysfunctional and there is trust. It doesn't work where there aren't already bounds to create the bonds of trust. We have to go to places where there are bonds of trust. With the Somali Americans, we can do that, and we found that with other immigrant communities in the Twin Cities, at least, and there's a lot of immigrants in the Twin Cities, which is Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota. There are, have functional social relationships where there are leaders who have trust. And so we work with leaders in communities where if there aren't, saving circles and that culture, then we will go there last.
Mm-hmm.
We can't create the trust. We have to be trusted the people who are already trusted.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, but in that present situations, like COVID-19, lot of financial challenge, and this kind of thing. Do you
Yeah,
think this housing industry will grow in these
right,
situations, or it will
right.
goes down, or what will be the futures for housing industry?
Well, I think that people's jobs are at risk, businesses are at risk. So, I think how much they can pay for houses will be less. And so, so it could be that, right in February, it made total sense to houses at $250,000 in Minneapolis. In Seattle, talking to the Somalis, the baseline was 400,000 because it's a more expensive city than Minneapolis. What that baseline will be, by 6 months from now, I don't know. I think the model of 100 neighbors investing in one neighbor and making money on that,
Mm-hmm.
a investment, not in the bank. We work with the Somali in Minneapolis put their money in the bank and then they give away the interest. So they never build up assets because they don't want interest to make money. But investing in a house where you make a profit, we can offer people 3.5% a fee 0.5% a year until they get their money back. And so they'll also get revenue, from revenue sharing from, the two places we've seen that where there already are existing Somalis that can expand the way they could if they could get interest-bearing loans, which is grocery stores, specifically around buying goat meat, and then actually nobody can keep enough goat meat on hand in little bodegas, little groceries. And so we're looking at a shared walk-in cooler that would be shared by 2 to 3 groceries. So you can keep enough goat meat on hand. Pay less for the main thing people want, which is goat meat. And they in the surveys that were done by the University of Wisconsin, in the warmer year, the more affluent Somalis, the more educated, and the ones who've been there longer eat goat meat 80% of the time. Poorer Somalis eat goat meat 40% of the time. So it's the key item in all their grocery stores. It's just it is culturally, goat meat. You eat goat meat. It's just the big thing. So we can cut the cost of goat meat, and we can have enough goat meat on hand, and our co-op will make money, and our business will make money.
Yes. So, like example,
problems like that.
Yes, in Asia, we saw that those who live in congested place, let's say I live in Malaysia, I know many of the laborers, they are actually affected here, and those who live in congested place, they are actually affected by COVID-19 and these kind of things. What do things like example, if you can implement neighbors house, this kind of policy, their life change, and they are ready to change, and they are ready to pay this kind of project?
Yeah. We are finding great demand. I mean, great demand before COVID. But right now, we were planning to get 600 people together with several imams who've written, going to be writing small fatwas saying, yes, this works. There is no hidden interest inside. There are a couple of vendors who are claiming to be halal, who have mortgages programs in the U.S. And then people pay about $60,000 more for those mortgages, and they're finding that actually then they resell those mortgages into the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Wall Street maelstrom, and they're finding that an interest-bearing bank is actually collecting on the mortgage month, and we're working against that. So we know that there is high demand. Somalis are pretty well educated folks in and $2,500. You have to be able to come up with $2,500 to be a member, and then that money will be paid back over 15 years. We're finding that there is that desire. They keep cash and they make money. See, this is a safe way to invest. That you're investing, but you're getting paid. You're making money, and so this is they don't have good retirement plans that are halal. There are a few public market, what do you call them, exchange traded funds, but they would much rather invest locally with their retirement funds. And there's a big problem of education debt that we think we can solve with this same sort of thing. A group of neighbors invest in a kid going to college and getting paid back by a percentage of their future revenues. There are businesses that are making that work in Brazil and a couple of other places in South America, and there's a real desire for that. if the investing in this has high trust, where the leaders are trusted, then I think this can be, a revolutionary way to have, halal neighbor investing, neighbor finance for houses, for education, and for business expansion. How it goes up into commercial, you know, you walk on the street, you'll know, 100 of your neighbors house invested in that house. I think we can do with, we build, and then we want to get white allies, majority allies, non-Somali allies, who also invest and see that, Somali families becoming more resilient. Kids do better in school when they have a bedroom, as opposed to 5 kids sharing the coffee table in an apartment, or the kitchen table in an apartment. So people will do better. We'll be able to tell them how lives are better by kids being in houses when they're in school. So what people will be and apartments, and get out of things that many Somalis live in. They can be healthier. So I think we have lots of ways we can demonstrate the benefit. In my culture, this wouldn't work mostly. I think the Catholics who build cooperatives. I'm a white Christian Protestant, but culture is a culture of mutual dependency, and so I think that's going to be some of our first allies, and we're going to be working with a particular Catholic parish and a group, and the University of Notre Dame, to teach folks the kind of mutual interdependency, and that neighbors investing in neighbors is part of what the Christian gospel is about. And we'll also be creating relationships with immigrants that are not philanthropic, handing down from the powerful to the needy, but reciprocal, where you put money in, pay back. It's a relationship of reciprocity and trust with an equal, compared to giving, from the affluent to the needy.
Yes. One thing, like example, do you think this immigrant peoples, they have proper financial knowledge, or those who many people go for study in USA for technology, for many things, but what's their integrations with the knowledge of financials, knowledge or financial policy, economic adaptabilities?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is a real simple thing. They don't need to know much. If there is a culture of saving circles where 10 women are saving $100 a week or $1,000 a month with 10 other women or 20 women, it feels really normal. The folks who save together, and now they're investing together and getting that money back. So that's all I need to know, is that my neighbor, and I get in line to become a homeowner myself. That's all you need to know. And then you start getting checks, and it works. And I think the default, you have 100 people who are counting on you. We need some government support, philanthropic, what we call people lose jobs, people get sick, and you need 3 months of payment. And so we're talking. There are U.S. government, typically cities who will support that, and also foundations. We don't think that it's significant because the social capital, you'll be letting down 99 of your neighbors, and there will be a social stigma on you, on your daughter, on your son, on your wife, on your grandmother, on your nephew, on your uncle, on your cousins. It's a really high cost to default, and we will pick people who have enough social capital and ability to pay. The same way by telling you pay. You pay. make this payment? Do you have solid income? Do you have 3 years of employment somewhere? We will work with people who have jobs who can pay who can pay first.
Yes, yes, very interesting, very interesting. Because I'm just trying to like understand and creating a bridging in between Asia and USA. Like example, your concept maybe we can implement in Asia as well with the help of you. Like in
Yeah,
future, if we request from
I'm.
world.
I think this is an idea I'd love to figure out how to. I would love to work with folks to see how this adapts in the cultural context that I know nothing about.
Okay, very
I
interesting.
mean, I'm sure there are, Malaysian say, email me and I can connect you with Jeffrey Ashley. We can really fund Malaysian saving circles that this could be connected to.
Yes,
He's the leading expert on saving circles
yes, yes,
internationally
yes.
or globally, really.
Yes, like we are running World Asia Research and Development Institutions, and we like scholar like you, those who
Right.
can train people, those who can share their knowledge, those who can come up with a good investment and good economic policy for Asia, in Malaysia and the other countries as well. This is our target as well. So
Right.
basically, like why you choose
Right.
this kind of thing? Because this is very interesting. Like American peoples, they are helping
Yeah.
immigrant and they are trying to change their life with their basic things. But like how this kind of things you build up, and this is the great thing of USA. Like USA have many big, brilliant mind like you.
Well, I been working with immigrants for a little more than 3 years now. And what I find is that they're so enterprising. They are ready to go, and they're trying to better their lives, but they're also doing it together. I think climate change requires coordinated collective action. You look at all these technology solutions, and we need everybody to do it. But immigrants are already doing coordinated collective action. So I think we will look at climate change insurance once we get to 100 houses or so, and we'll look at mutual insurance. And so I think, I'm learning from how, I think immigrants have so much to teach native-born Americans about how to invest in their neighbor and, and work together. I think this is I'm working with the county. So look, let's learn from the immigrants who come here and are investing in themselves, who realize, that nobody's going to rescue them. They have to do it collectively, and let's do it ourselves. So I'm with this Catholic group. We're working with a Catholic parish where they're going to do some invest in some tiny houses on some of their property, because a lot of churches are getting shuttered, and there's a lot of potential for housing on church property. And we want to see if we can do that through neighbors investing in neighbors. So we want to, taking a model of mutual collective action, coordinated collective action from immigrants. We want to see if we can transform American society, because we used to do that. We used to have things called barn raisings, where everybody would get together and build a barn for their neighbor. And we become way too individual, way too isolated, way too selfish. I think that we have to learn. So I think you can get there a couple different ways. We can have them immigrants investing in their neighbors through, donor advised funds, or ways to invest where larger money from white folks doesn't give them too many votes. And then they can also start emulating and replicating the model of neighbors investing in neighbors. And so I think, people my kids' generation, my kids are 40 and 42, and people younger for them, dose of neighbors investing in neighbors is much more in line with the way they think about property. So there's a method of local collective economy that we will need post-COVID. And I think it's more open to a collective economy of mutual interdependence after the pandemic than they are before. They were before. And so I think, the for to be replicated in the U.S. is a lot stronger than it would have been. Can you go to the other room, please, Liza? Thank you. And then it would have been before. So, I think, it's good for Americans to learn from the immigrants, and that, this is not philanthropy from the all-knowing, affluent, wise white Americans. It's actually learning from a cultural practice that immigrants have done, and we can hopefully, transform our economy to be more inherently cooperative.
Mhm. So this is very interesting point that you believe that American people also learn from the immigrant people cultures. This is very interesting thing for me.
Yeah.
And one important things. What do you think? The COVID situation. What will be the real situation? What will happen? I don't know. Like many of the people are afraid, and many things happening
Yeah.
around the world. So, what will your prediction next 1, 2, or 3 years? What
Yeah.
will happen?
I think that our survival is based on our mutual interdependency.
Hmm.
I think that's been more true in the COVID crisis,
Hmm.
and it will be more true afterwards. I think
Hmm.
that people's allegiance to a neoliberal capitalism that sees itself as a force of nature, not something that we created, and that sees people as expendable human resources, and this
Hmm.
will
Hmm.
be more, because people on the front lines who are called essential are actually expendable. So I think
Hmm.
people will be looking for a new,
Hmm.
more in line
Hmm.
with how we're caring for each other collectively during
Hmm.
the pandemic. So I think there's an opening. There's a thing called the Overton window, which is just what's possible. I think there will be an extension of the Overton window that allows for mutual interdependence more after the pandemic than there was before. I see it as a tragic crisis that we're handling particularly badly in the United States, but I think it does, people's desire for something other than being an expendable human resource, in the maw of Amazon and the other global giants, uh, will be more open. Jeff Bezos is in line to be the first billionaire or trillionaire, and people in Amazon warehouses don't have protective personal equipment, and they're dying, and they don't make a living wage. I think everybody's allegiance to the previous economy that treated them as just as commodities. I think people are realizing they are expendable human resources and commodities, and I think people will be less willing to be expendable human commodities. So I think our economy will be much more localized because the global supply chains are also at risk. So I think we'll have much more local supply chains.
Hmm. Yes, yes.
And I think our housing crisis was caused by houses becoming, these fictions. We're not going to financialize housing. We're going to invest the money from mortgages rather than selling in the secondary market. We will invest in local businesses with mortgage money.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay, very interesting. So I think like your predictions that this world in anyhow they will survive from the situations, but we need more like more
Mm.
unity, more unique relationship, more transparency. We have to rely on each others.
Mm-hmm.
But in that situation, we saw many things in media.
Yeah.
We saw many things in politics. But everybody blaming each other, this country, that country, in that situations. How we can make
Yeah.
a global
Yeah.
relationship, how we survive in a global world, how we make business in global
Yeah.
community.
Well, you know, I think nobody lives in the global community. You live where you live. I live where I live, and I think there's so much more isolation. Uh, in your local city. So I think we can build bridges across neighborhoods. Immigrants, it's statistically proven that Americans are more racist in cities where they don't know people of color. More there have relationships with immigrants, with brown people, with people of other than white. Immigrants and people of color are safer because they don't have a crazy image in their head. They have a relationship. So we want to build relationships across neighborhoods, from immigrant neighborhoods to affluent white neighborhoods, that are not, top-down philanthropic. We give to the needy, but we invest in them, and they increase the property values in my city. They lower the social service cost in our city, and we get paid, and we see the lives. So I think the bill. So if you believe in it, you have to decouple yourself from the myth that immigrants are frightening, and you can do that by having local relationships. And these are local relationships that make immigrants safer, that make white folks money.
Yes, yes. I just want to know, because in a long time I'm working with the global community. I find many people actually
Yeah,
very helpful, very friendly, from US community, from
yeah,
Europe
yeah.
community, and side by side there are
Right,
some
yeah,
people, they are just thinking based on color. Like I'm from the different color, so okay, why this matters? What's the
right.
real cultural fact? Like why they are born in that mindset,
Yeah.
or why don't we make this more friendly?
Well, yeah, yeah. Well, the United States was built on genocide of the indigenous people and on slavery. So being
Mhm.
honest about our original sins is not something we're great about. And so demonizing the other covers up some of that original sin. I mean, I think, we have to work on reparations with the indigenous. We have to work on reparations around slavery. So we stole 200 plus years of labor from African Americans. I mean, I think, if your country is built on stealing the land from the native people who are there, and then you build your economy on importing slaves, uh, that's that's in the water. I think you can change it by humanizing. There are those who want to demonize. Star Finance is about humanizing. It's pretty simple.
Mhm.
We want to replace the demonization with
Mhm.
humanization, and
Mhm.
humanization that makes you money.
Mhm. 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 Yeah, yes, just I want to know, like example, when I meet many of my Asian friends in different countries, I find many of them actually not so confident. They are not more live like before. Example, like what's the reason? Like when they integrated with
Yeah.
like you and your company or your community, do they feel better?
Mm,
Do they feel more
mm,
confident?
yeah.
Do they
Right.
create any changes for US economy and something like that?
Oh, I think so. Yeah. I mean, I just have my experience, here in Nashville with the immigrants, and pretty amazing and in what they're doing. They're already, they've bought the land under their trailer parks in several places to keep them safe, and now they're buying through a cooperative. They're buying some commercial buildings and renovating themselves. And so, already doing it. Yeah. There's a thing called internalized depression, and it means when people put you down, you believe you're down. I think asset ownership is a way to directly work internal depression. This is a new story. Really, American who's built a really good translation business in the medical center there. So if you speak Farsi, he can translate Farsi to your English doctor. If you speak, Urdu, he can translate it. If you speak, Spanish, whatever. And he said, this is completely new and innovative, what you're doing with Star Finance, neighbors investing in neighbors. But I could explain it to my grandmother who died 30 years ago in 30 seconds. I said, Grandma, it's just like saving circles, but we're doing it for houses. It's like, oh, okay.
Mhm.
And we're also investing for retirement in ways that are halal, no interest applied. So,
Mhm.
our earliest market will be observant Muslims who could afford a house but won't. And they will sort of underwrite the business reaches to folks who can't afford a down payment.
Mhm. Yes, yes, very interesting. So, for the Asian peoples, for the Asian community, especially for Malaysia, so what's your few messages and
Yeah.
what you want to say to them?
I would want to, what I look for are thriving saving circles with good community leadership where you have a few hundred people who are houses. We have a six house model that works. I can explain it, where we cover our costs with one of the first six houses, and we want a someone where to resell the houses so that they can become an engine for we'll use the money we sell the house to a cooperative lender or some good lender that won't make it a financial and we one of the things we'll do is bring houses up to code, and so that we make more money there. So we may have $100,000 in a $250,000 house, and we make more profit. Or if we build a house, we may have $150,000 in a house, so we make more profit. We would then make the housing more profitable, and once we've done that for a few cycles and have some profit built up, then we'll put some of the sales into revenue share business expansion for folks who won't take loans. Our easiest market are observant Muslims who will make, and so we can solve housing and we can solve small business expansion. On a broader scale, I'm working with an Islamic lawyer in California on a education finance similar kind of thing, revenue share, and that's a bigger thing that could go a lot of places. But any place where education debt is a real problem. But I'd love to explore it. I think we need a particular legal form here. We're using a form of hybrid cooperative that then you also need to turn into a local security so that people in Minnesota can do this. When we go to Texas or Seattle or anywhere else, we'll need to turn it into a security there. So it's $95,000 in cost to go through, replicating a state securities. I don't know what the legal restraints are, is what I'm saying. I know how to do it legally in every state in the U.S.
Mhm. Yes, yes. Basically, from World Talent Economic Forum, we have built up these things in from Asia, but we want more global perspective. We want more
Yeah,
global involvement. We want to share about everyone. We want to care about everyone. We never know, like with your idea, with your theoretical aspects, with your policy, maybe we can change millions of lives. We can change millions of
I would
people.
love to.
Even example, many of the
I believe it's
peoples they,
possible.
yes, that is the way that when we build up this.
Sharif, I, I can keep talking for a little bit, but I need to run out. I'll be back in a minute. Okay?
Okay, okay, okay,
I'll be back in a minute.
okay.
Yeah.
Yes, actually, the audience, you see, Mr. Kevin actually just thinking one of the interesting issues. Like example, many of the Asian people, you go to USA, so they also have many brilliant things. He has an idea: neighbors build neighbor house. Like most of the people, they are struggling with these things. Like example, many of the peoples, they go to USA. Many of the immigrant, they go to USA, but they do not have uh, their housing and this kind of things. So in that particular situations, actually, if you get this kind of mentors, this kind of peoples, and you can build up a very good ecosystems, then it will be really helpful. and then it will be really meaningful, and you can contribute more in that particular situation. Basically, World Talent Economy Forum, we have our objective. Our major objective is that we want to bring all of the brilliant mind together. We never mind. It's from USA, it's from Europe, it's from China, it's from Malaysia, and it's from South Asia, even it's from Africa. So we want to build up a very strong ecosystems. With in between our ecosystems, we want to do our best. We want to help together each others. We want to help peoples. We want to just share our thoughts, our views, and definitely we will go for online training, we will go for conference, we will go for research, and many more things. Welcome, Mr. Kevin. Welcome. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I'm
Yes.
back.
No, no
Yes,
problem.
I
No
was able
problem.
to hear all that. That sounds great. I would love to see how to replicate this idea. I mean, I'm working on replicating it in Portland, Oregon right now, with a Catholic community that has some land that wants to do some tiny houses. And so, we haven't, we know how it works, but I think we also need to tell the story to white culture. So that's, from that, we'll be building up some curriculum and some manuals and things that explain to people how to do this in other places. So that's where we're working on the education piece of this project. Working on the actual implementation with the Somali Americans first in Minneapolis.
Okay, great. Basically, we also have a target. We want to build up a very strong ecosystems with knowledgeable people like you, and we will go for different kind of online training, online conference. We want to implement your knowledge, and we need more of your
Okay.
help. And hopefully, we can build up a brilliant platform. We work for
Okay.
each other, and by this way we can enrich our
That sounds
capacity,
great, Charlie.
and we can change our economic perspective. It's a very nice discussions. Definitely we want to
Right.
invite you in Malaysia, and if you come here, there is a very beautiful place. It's a very beautiful countries, very beautiful mans, and most
That's what
importantly
I
they
hear.
control this COVID-19 very strongly. Here's doctors and the here governments, they're playing a very good role. So hopefully we will meet together,
Oh, that's
and
great.
we will make a brilliant plan together, and we will implement it. Thank you, Mr. Kevin, for your time and everything.
Thank you so much,
Yes,
Charlie. It's been
yes,
my pleasure.
yes, yes,
Thank
yes.
you
Thank
so
you.
much. I'm
Thank you.
looking forward to further
Yes.
connections. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you everyone for watching today's shows. So every day we will come up with some of the brilliant peoples, and those who can change our lives, and those who can change our thoughts and everything. Thank you everyone. Stay with us. Bye bye.